Welcome to Escapists Anonymous, the fantasy fiction book club. I'm Dan.
And I'm Sam. This is a podcast for people who love to read and who read to escape into worlds of magic and adventure. But don't let that adventure end when you finish your book.
Join us on Escapists Anonymous to carry on the conversation.
Oh, well, this new episode, Dan, and this new book, we have some explaining to do. At the end of the last episode, we said we were going to read Alchemized by SenLinYu. And that is still true to some extent. But I can't say that what this is about, we're about to do here is a full review. Because neither of us finished it. And so this is our first episode where we hit a did not finish, a DNF.
Yeah, and yeah, I guess to clarify, not just that we haven't yet finished it, we both got to a point and put the book down and decided that we had had enough.
Yeah.
And it was a bit of a kind of, I text you saying, I don't think I can do it anymore. And you were like, thank goodness.
Yeah, I like, there was one part of me that was thinking, no, if Dan presses on, then I'm going to press on. But I think when you said it, I was like, okay, right, let's call it a day on this. And we also had to have the discussion about, well, we have some idea of the fan base around this book, the hype that surrounded its release, and what the ramifications might be.
Yeah.
Not finishing it, and also not having much positive things to say about it. And
yeah,
like,
but also having gone into it without knowing that and only realizing that when I was 100 plus pages in.
Yeah, likewise. I was about 100 or so pages in, and then you text me to say that this was Harry Potter fan fiction.
Yeah, I mean, I just got to a point where I was seeing it all over social media, and I was so confused because it's a debut novel. You don't often get this level of hype for an author's first novel. And also, yeah, the size of it to be published 1,000 pages on your debut novel. I was like, how does this happen? Because usually, editors are going to be trying to get it down to a reasonable length for the audience. So I obviously did a little bit of digging and realised that this was an incredibly popular Dramione fan fiction. Dramione being the Draco Hermione fantasy romance slash.
So, because the reason why we chose this book had nothing to do with that. It was because I was looking online and I was just like, oh, let's find some books. And one thing that I've been asking Dan to do for a while was I want to read a really big book. Like, we'd kind of approached it with Mistborn, which was like 730 something pages. But like a staple of fantasy are these huge tomes, 1,000 plus things, like, your later George R.R. Martin's, some of my favourite ever books. I don't have one of them here, but like Stephen Donaldson's Chronicles of Thomas Covenant, the Unbeliever, like big things. And so when I saw this was over 1,000 pages, I was like, perfect. Big new release. It's a huge one. There's a lot of hype around it, seeming it's been pushed on the website I'm on. So let's do it. And that was without any context of what was around it. I think we've covered that kind of brief summary, but, even though we've not finished it, shall I do the blurb just to
yeah, we'll see if it tells us anything about what we did read.
Once a promising alchemist, Helena Marino is now a prisoner of war and of her own mind. Her resistance friends and allies have been brutally murdered, her abilities suppressed, and the world she knew destroyed. In the aftermath of a long war, Palladia's new ruling class of corrupt guild families and depraved necromancers, whose vile undead creatures helped bring about their victory, holds Helena captive. According to Resistance records, she was a healer of little importance within their ranks, but Helena has inexplicable memory loss of the months leading up to her capture, making her enemies wonder, is she truly as insignificant as she appears, or are her lost memories hiding some vital piece of the Resistance's final gambit? To uncover the memories buried deep within her mind, Helena is sent to the High Reeve, one of the most powerful and ruthless necromancers in this new world. Trapped on his crumbling estate, Helena's fight to protect her lost history and to preserve the last remaining shreds of her former self is just beginning. For her prison and captor have secrets of their own, secrets Helena must unearth, whatever the cost. That even felt long.
Cut it down. Jesus.
Cut it down.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think the opening bit of the book, I was like, you know what, I'm up for this. This is actually quite gory and grim, and you've talked a lot about like grim dark and all this kind of stuff, and like how this is a thing. I was like, all right, we're really going to experience some of that. Like, you know, I'm picturing the lab that Helena wakes up in, and it's like these tanks, green light, dark. Like someone turns up and gets their chest brutally opened, and there's zombies wandering. I was like, great, cool, but like. So I checked, and I finished at 160 pages in, so not as far as you. And so little happened in the 160 pages to justify that length.
Yeah.
Like, I made a bullet point of when I stupidly speed read it again, that bit that I'd done, and it didn't get any easier. So the bullet points I've got of what happens in 160 pages is Helena wakes up and is interrogated about how she survived, and we get glimpses of what happened before this. A character called Grace turns up and gives loads of unnecessary exposition that we could easily find out later on about why the resistance failed. We find out that Helena is a healer. Her nullification set is applied. Mandel gets a necrothrall body. She gets sent to the High Reeve, and then he starts to probe her mind. She reacts badly. We see a flashback of Luke, and then Cain kills the family at the party. That's some books. That's almost halfway through a novel, and I've got what could amount to be the first couple of chapters, if I'm honest. And even then, I'm padding because like Mandel gets given a necrothrall body is like it happens in between. I was like, okay, that's something I remember.
That's about a page and a half.
Yeah, but but most of those bullet points are the first 50 pages, when I think I was having a bit more of a better time. When I was rereading, I was like, okay, so we're getting to Cain Ferren's manor at around page 55, 60. And I stopped at page 160. So 100 pages is her sitting in the mansion, being interrogated, I think, twice, and we don't find out a huge amount.
No.
And then the party happens. Like, that is 100 pages of nothing.
Yeah. And it's just, I mean, obviously it carries on. I got to about 25% in the audio book, which we worked out to be about 250 pages based on the length of the book. And that basically continues, you know, this interrogation and her remembering these really dull memories from, you know, her previous life in the resistance or whatever. And then and you got to the bit where he kind of brutally murders that family in front of everyone. Cain Ferren, this is, and then the moment I stopped was where Cain Ferren reluctantly rapes Helena, and I think probably like both of us had this feeling about. So Cain Ferren is the Draco Malfoy character.
Yeah,
Helena is obviously the Hermione character, and there's this kind of tide that you can feel of us seemingly being persuaded that he is a character that we should sympathise with, or that he is in this position against his will, and there's some good deep down in him, or something like that, and that eventually we're going to get to this Dramione romance moment. But in those 250 pages, he's brutally murdered a family, including a small child, and he's committed rape. And at that moment, I was like, I don't think that I am interested in the character arc anymore. Like that's it for me.
This character has crossed a moral boundary where it's like, I don't want them to get together. If that is the end point of this novel, it's not one I want to see, because there's no way you can justify him being redeemed.
Yeah.
Because it's not even as if the way that he killed that family, like he was like being forced to. He seemingly did it because he wanted to avoid someone else killing them more cruelly.
Yeah.
He still killed them. Like, he still took an active part in a family's death, and we're supposed to be like, oh, what a tortured soul.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, how merciful.
Yeah, exactly. I can't wait for him to be free of all this. Like, let's be honest. If at the end of this book, or if, God forbid, there's another one in the series, there's a, like, you know, the Resistance topples the evil empire, he's got to be done for war crimes, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's not going to. Him and Helena aren't going to walk away from this being like, right, now we can be a couple. No,
Yeah, no.
like, no, this man needs to be locked away.
Yeah.
Helena as well. Like, I wanted to like her more, but she's very passive. Like, really, really kind of like spends a lot of the time scrabbling at walls, sitting morosely. It's like, I want to feel that there's a spark to this character. Like, you know, it's, you know, like, I get there's a lot up against her. We're supposed to come to her at the darkest point in her life. Like, the Resistance has been destroyed. She's just been in stasis, in torture for months and months. But like, I still don't even, like, again, it's fine if that eventually happens, but we're talking about, for you, a quarter of the way through, me 160 pages in, I haven't seen really any glimpse of any personality that makes me want to keep reading. If I'm getting this far into a book, you need to have given me more.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, you know, she spends most of that time where I got up to, there's the constant, you know, plan for her to try and kill herself somehow.
Yeah.
And then
exactly.
I don't know whether you got to this
seemingly
point, but she actually got the opportunity. She managed to break into a dining room and find a load of cutlery. And I found myself being like, come on, you can do it. Like, you can execute your plan. That's the right thing to do. Like, they're going to get all of this information out of you. And
like, again, like, if that
we can end this now. 250 pages, it's fine.
A quarter of the way in, and that's still her best option. And it's just like, I just feel that there should have been more progression by that point. No, I didn't get to that point when she tries to kill herself.
No, well, she didn't. That was the annoying thing.
Yeah, and it's so tough, because it's just like, I shouldn't have to work this hard to enjoy a novel. And again, I really wanted the grim dark. I was like, right, I'm ready for brutality. I'm ready for this stuff. But it's like, it's not earned. There's never that point in this book where I'm like, all right, now she's gonna get an upper hand. She's gonna do something, like something that tells me that she's the one that we're following her story for a reason, because you know, that's why the writer literally chose to put her as the protagonist, and we get nothing.
So I don't know whether you looked into like the structure of what happens next in the book, or how it goes on. So basically, yeah, I can see this a bit more easily on the audio book, because I can just whiz through what the chapters look like. So I think I was a few chapters away from the end of part 1. Part 2 becomes the lengthy retelling of what's happened prior to her, you know, being a prisoner in stasis. That's the like meat and bones of the book, apparently, which we hadn't got to in 250 pages. And then it comes back to the present day in part 3.
That makes me even more annoyed.
Yeah.
Because, but the reason why is because so much of the first part of this book is really awkward shoehorning in of mentions of stuff that happened before. Like, there's so much of it. Like, the story cannot progress because every other paragraph is her sidetracking into explaining what a character did. And then it was when you explained to me that, like, this was Harry Potter, I was like, okay, it makes sense as that, because when it's like, oh, and then she was sitting in the car thinking about Lily or Lila, and of course when Lila was doing this back in the day, and this was happening, she of course was doing this, and this meant this, and I was just like, why am I learning this? Or when Grace starts telling her like who got killed and when at different points, but when she was in stasis, it's like, why is Grace telling me all of this? Like, Grace is running through and being like, okay, Helena, we must know this. Okay, let me sit down and tell
And
you.
now you know that it goes on to retell the story anyway.
You could just have told me it then.
Yeah.
Just imply this stuff. Suggest a resistance is lost. Have brief mentions of things.
Yeah.
It's such a clumsy way to give me backstory, especially now knowing that it's about to come in like the largest chunk of the book.
Yeah.
Like, God's sake.
Yeah, and once I knew it was Harry Potter fan fiction rewritten, I couldn't unknow that. That was problematic. So obviously there's this premise that in the Half-Blood Prince at the end, Draco has killed Dumbledore and then has become Voldemort's golden boy and then risen to this, he's basically the second most powerful person in the Death Eater whatever movement. But I was trying to think, like, is all of these problems, is it a problem of it being written as a series? Like, she hasn't written this as one book originally. This is like something she's like, I'm going to write a chapter and post it up on my blog. And so the story, if you were reading it like that, is fine because you're only reading, whatever, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 words a month or something like that. However, I don't know how often she was posting. But then when you come to rewrite it, surely, I mean, it feels like the editors have just been like, just change Death Eaters for undying and blah 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 and and don't get rid of the fact that they went to school together and did they go to school?
They
together?
did go to school because the Alchemist Tower and all that kind of stuff. Like, its whole point is like the Hogwarts has been turned into the central command of the new empire, and so. When she releases it serially, she should have reviewed this more in depth and been like, right, what do I know is coming later, because I'm not writing this ad hoc week on week. I now know that I don't need to do all that pre-exposition because this is going to happen later. Like, I'm no longer doing it where, like, okay, my fans are going to be reading the next chapter on my online blog, so I need to have a little reference to what happened to one of the characters. I need to say about, well, what happened to Ginny? What happened to whoever? Like, it's like, you don't need that anymore because you're telling a different story in a different format. It is now a single novel that I can read through. And I think that's just what made the early bit, while I was really intrigued, I was like, okay, so these undying, there's this Lumithium, and it contains, you can imbue it with resonance. I was like, okay, we're building up a magical system here. Okay, well, let's see. Okay, so she's just mentioned there's a bracelet, and okay, now we've got another page and a half more about resonance. This seems like, I think I marked it out in my thing, just like when she starts doing this, just like jumping off into these, she's just come into, she's like inside the stasis tank. She's been constantly aware of them clamped around her wrist. Their existence has persisted along the edge of her consciousness. An inescapable presence has stifled her resonance, preventing any transmutation or manipulation that might have let her escape. Great, that's all I need to know. By its nature, Lumithium bound the four elements of air, earth, water. It's just like, oh, okay, so we're going more into this when you're struggling to get out. Like, you're in a point of crisis. Why at this point is this kind of character
info dumping
doing this? Like, if it's like, I couldn't help it, like, because that's how, like, I mean, even if we go back and look from a few episodes ago, we've got from Catabasis, when she's like, my memory contains so much information it's spilling out. They at least try to justify it, whereas here the whole point is her memory's closed off. She's supposed to be unable to access all of her memories and her thoughts, and yet somehow it's spilling out like there's no control. Like, that seems counter to the whole point of her mind being locked off. It's
either we're her perspective, or we have hovering over narrator who's going to do info dump stuff. But I mean, it was just such a slog, and then with the actual content itself, it was really hard work. I mean, I did a little post on Fable and just said, sorry, got 25% of the way through, had to put it down, DNF. And someone commented, not in any way aggressively, just saying like, oh, part 2's the best part. If DNF'd it before that, you like it like explains the whole lot. You lose loads of the discussions about the idea of religion, consequences of the war, insignificance of women at wartime, so much more. It's like, well, it's great. Those themes sound like interesting themes to have in a novel, but don't make me read. I mean, because I think I still had another 50 plus pages to go to get to part 2. Like, I don't want to read 300 pages before I get to that. And I'm not impatient. Like, I'll read along, but I've just read the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb. Like, you have to be patient to enjoy those things. But they do something that Brendan Sanderson talks about in his novel writing lectures that you can see on YouTube. It is a promise, progress, and a payoff. And that is that's the key ingredient to a good book. You set out what the promise, or sometimes people call it the premise, but like it's like a sort of promise. What is the main character trying to achieve? Like, hint at where their end goal is at the beginning, and then throughout the whole book. And he says in every chapter there should be progress towards that, and that's where it just absolutely failed for me. Like, even if the payoff at the end is like amazing, it doesn't matter, because you've got to keep me there in order for me to see it.
Let me be generous. There were some things, if I go back to that first 50 pages in particular, there were certain bits where I was like, okay, I'm intrigued by some of this. Like the magical system of how vivomancy and necromancy were outlawed. And the whole point was that these were kind of like, repressed forms of magic because they were deemed beyond the pale, and the whole, the high necromancer and his whole rise, it was because they wanted justice for their forms of magic. They thought they were equal and justified of being out in the world. And you had the holdfasts. They were this kind of family. I think I can't remember which character questioned it, but like, why were the holdfasts the ones who were always in power? Why was it unquestioned that they were always the ones to rule? Were they best? And we get this hint that like Luke didn't really want power, or he was going to be bad for it because like he was like addicted to opium from some kind of like, there's all these different things. It was like, okay, there's a measure of like stuff going on here, that's questioning like existing power structures. However, like, I did feel that some of that was also just like a little bit problematic, because it felt like, oh, you just got to swing to one other extreme. It's like, no, if you're questioning power, you don't have to like make it like, oh, the only response is totalitarianism or something like that. Like, I'm sure, again, I'm sure there are people who've read this book cover to cover and they'll come back to us and go, yeah, they explore this way more. It's, you learn so much more about the flaws of the holdfast, but you also see how they were potentially redeemable. But again, if we're hoping to see some kind of bringing to the center of, a character like Cain and the thoughts that were behind the holdfast and their rule, I can't find myself being on board with that happening, because a character like Cain is not someone who I want to carry on being in this novel. No. And that's a huge problem. Yeah. What was one of the other bits I liked? Oh, the metal house. When they arrived in the metal house and how they control it all, I was like, that's a cool feature. Like, it can be like, it can help you get around the house. It can help you bring things to you. It can throw out unwanted guests. I was like, that's a cool idea. So, there were just these nice little glimpses of stuff, like the way that her powers were suppressed. I thought, okay, this kind of like, it's almost like a kind of a short circuit on her power by putting something in that nullifies her resonance. Also a nice idea. But again, there is a vast gulf between great ideas and good execution. And
good writing,
and good writing. I mean, this is very, very much not that. And, and also, like, the motivations of the author, SenLinYu. Like, I briefly looked earlier today. I was like, so who is SenLinYu? And I was like, okay, raised in a conservative Christian household to an evangelical pastor. I was like, she's going to have issues around religion. Because, she's clearly moved away from that area. She now uses she and they pronouns, like, has really forged their own identity. And, we mentioned there's more about religion discussed later on in the book. I was like, okay, I can see why, because they're going to want to be working through a lot of stuff that's happened in their life, and maybe publishing this stuff and the identification with the Harry Potter, fan world has been something that's been really, really supportive for them, as much as I'm sure they probably don't want to distance themselves from J.K. Rowling's problematic ideas around gender. So, it's that kind of thing of like totally supportive of their journey as an author and, what they want to say about this book, about this world and how they're processing a lot of their own life experiences. Great. Really cool that that's happening. But it's really badly done.
Yeah. and if I could just have a little bit of a cynical view on the world of publishing at the highest level at the moment, where I feel like this is kind of just another example that like, if you've got a big enough social media following, you can get a probably 7-figure publishing deal. And I think that's sad for like some really good independent authors or like people who are trying to get published and maybe they're not as good at social media as, or, they haven't had this good fortune of doing fan fiction and then just, have I'm not saying it's easy to translate 1,000 pages into a different world and different characters and whatever, but like I felt a bit sad about that as a concept. But I think we should probably leave it there because we didn't read the full book, so we can't review it in full. I think my call to action for people is we've made an assumption that this is going down a Draco Hermione romance, Helena Kane Ferren romance, and that was why we just couldn't stomach continuing on with the story. That alongside just the general like length of it, and if we're wrong about what that direction of travel is, tell us. I'd be interested to know. I'm still not going to read it because it's still too long, but I want to be told, and I'm happy to be told if I'm wrong.
Tell us if the writing gets better. We were talking about the fact that the book was clearly not much adaptation has happened between the serialization and the publication. Like, does she get better as an author? Is it like by the end of it you can see where her talent has been forged in these years and years of publishing this book? Because if there's a journey within that, it's also an interesting artifact of of an author's progression. But yeah, no, I won't be going back to this book, but I do hope that other people who read it do really enjoy it. And I'm not going to say like you shouldn't be enjoying this because it's not any good. It's like I didn't enjoy it. I didn't get on with the writing style.
And the other thing is, if you hadn't read the original like fan fiction stuff, are you someone that's managed to not read that and enjoy this? Are most of the people that have enjoyed this the people that have read the fan fiction version of it and they're enjoying reading a book? I think the second time, as maybe our next episode might be a good example of, is possibly more enjoyable. You don't have to focus on the plot as much, you can get into the detail, but yeah, let us know. We want to hear your views and comments on this massive release, huge hype. Didn't live up to it for us, but maybe it did for you, and hope you, like Sam said, I hope you enjoyed it reading it, and we don't want our views to ruin anyone else's experience. But if you've got comments for us, let us know down below. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a like and a subscribe as well while you're here, that helps. If you want to get in touch on social media, at Escapists Anonymous Pod on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, leave us a message, leave us a comment on one of our posts, and we'd love to engage with that. And our next episode is a real treat for me because I've persuaded Sam to read the first couple of one of my favourite ever series, which is a series that's still ongoing, is Ben Aronovich's Rivers of London. So we're going to cover Rivers of London and Moon Over Soho. So we're getting into urban fantasy. Like I said, real treat for me, and hope you can join us for that. Get reading. They're relatively bite-sized.
Compared to the Alchemized.
Yeah, I mean, you could read several of them in the time that you could read Alchemized. So hopefully we'll have a great conversation around that. Thanks ever so much for tuning in wherever you're doing so. It really means a lot to us. And all that's left to say is goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.